The bride told me to wear white, and when I showed up, every other bridesmaid was in blue. Bella and I have been best friends since we were 5. She moved in next door, and we were inseparable from that day on. We did everything together growing up, and even when I went to college a few hours away, she visited constantly and we stayed close. During my sophomore year, I met a guy named Drew through mutual friends. Can you imagine having your best friend, someone you've known since you were 5 years old, meticulously plan your public humiliation? What if that betrayal was just the tip of a dark, twisted iceberg, built on a lie so outrageous it made your stomach churn? It started innocently enough. Drew and I hooked up a few times in college, nothing serious, just casual. We were always just acquaintances. Then, at a senior year party, I introduced him to Bella, my best friend. She was instantly obsessed. Later, she cornered me, asking about our history. I was completely honest. I told her we'd had a few casual hookups, but it meant nothing to me, and she had my full blessing to go for it. And she did. Within months, they were officially dating. After graduation, I moved 6 hours away for a new job, while Bella and Drew stayed back home, eventually moving in together. Life got busy as it does, and I saw them less, but we always reconnected during the holidays. Last Christmas, at my family's annual party, Drew proposed to Bella. Everyone was thrilled. Bella spent the entire holiday beaming, talking wedding plans, and repeatedly telling me I'd be her maid of honor. Then, silence. She started screening my calls. Months went by where I barely heard from her. When I finally got her on the phone, she dropped a bombshell. She told me I couldn't be in the wedding because I lived too far away. She'd given maid of honor to her cousin, a woman Bella openly couldn't stand. I was crushed, but I offered to fly in for every single event. She shut me down cold. A few weeks later, I scrolled through social media and saw photos of her engagement party. I hadn't even been invited. The hurt was deep, but I tried to move on. Then, 6 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang. It was Bella. A bridesmaid had dropped out, and she asked if I could fill in. I said yes. Immediately. I know. My heart must have been thicker than my head. She then told me the bridal party was doing a reverse color palette. Bridesmaids would wear white, and she and Drew would wear black. I already had a simple white slip dress, so I sent her a photo. A quick text back, a thumbs up emoji. She approved it. I thought, finally we're okay again. The morning of the wedding, I arrived at the venue at 8 a.m., ready for hair and makeup with the girls. Bella hugged me, and for a fleeting moment it did feel like old times. We drank champagne, laughed, and I started to believe the distance, the silence, the hurt, it was all behind us. 2 hours before the ceremony, Bella told everyone to get dressed for photos. I changed in the bathroom, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement. I walked back into the room and my stomach dropped. Every single bridesmaid was wearing blue. Every single one. I was the only one in white. I stood there, frozen, my brain struggling to catch up. Bella had told me white. She approved my dress. I had the text. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. Bella stood in the middle of the room, still in her bathrobe, arms crossed. She looked at her cousin, a chilling smirk playing on her lips, and said, "I told you she'd do something like this." Her cousin, a snarling pit bull in human form, marched over and started screaming. "You jealous, desperate bitch!" she shrieked, her face inches from mine. "Everyone knows you're still in love with Drew. This is your pathetic attempt to ruin her wedding." I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. Bella just watched, that satisfied smirk fixed on her face, like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life. I tried to explain. She told me to wear white. I have proof, but no one listened. The other bridesmaids stared at me like I was insane. Bella's mom walked in, gasped, and immediately started whispering to the others, her eyes wide with manufactured shock. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone, desperate to show them the text message where Bella approved my dress. I opened the thread, and my heart sank into my shoes. The messages were gone. She had deleted them. I looked at Bella, tears streaming down my face. "Why are you doing this?" I choked out. Her face went cold. "You know exactly why," she hissed, then instantly plastered that sickly sweet smile back on. "Cousin, get her out of here before she causes more of a scene." The cousin grabbed my arm, yanking me towards the door. I pulled away, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not leaving until someone explains what is happening." Just then, the door swung open. Drew walked in. He wasn't supposed to see Bella before the ceremony, so everyone froze. His eyes scanned the room, landing on me, standing there in white, tears streaming down my face. His expression changed. It wasn't confusion. It was guilt. Bella's voice came out sharp. "What are you doing in here?" Drew didn't answer her. He just kept staring at me. Then he said my name, softly, sadly. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have told you." Bella's face went white. "What do you mean by that?" she demanded, her voice rising. I looked between them, completely lost. "What should you have told me?" Drew opened his mouth to answer, but Bella's cousin lunged, grabbing my arm again. "You need to leave now," she snarled. I ripped my arm free. "I'm not going anywhere." Drew took a step towards me. "Stop!" Bella screamed, a guttural sound that silenced the room completely. Then Drew spoke again. His voice was low, heavy. "There's something she needs to know. Something Bella has been hiding from her for over a year. Something that explains everything." He took a breath, a ragged, shaking sound that seemed to come from the depths of his chest. He looked at me, his eyes suddenly looking years older than they had just 5 minutes ago. "Bella and I," he said, "we've been trying to have a baby for over a year. We've tried everything. Doctors. Tests." His voice cracked. 3 months ago, we found out why it wasn't working. I'm infertile. Have been since birth. Something in my medical history makes it impossible. The room went dead silent. So quiet, I could hear someone's phone buzzing in a purse across the floor. Everyone was doing the math in their heads. If Drew couldn't have kids and never could, then our casual hookups in college, they couldn't have resulted in anything. The cousin's mouth fell open. One of the other bridesmaids put a hand over her lips. Bella's face went from angry red to a ghostly white in seconds. Then Bella started screaming. She shrieked at Drew. "Why would you tell her this now? Why would you humiliate me in front of everyone on my wedding day?" Her voice was shrill, cracking with rage. Drew didn't back down. "I'm tired of lying," he said, his voice firm. "Tired of watching you torture her for something that isn't her fault or mine. I can't stand here and let this continue when none of it is based on reality." Bella grabbed the edge of a makeup table, her knuckles turning white. "Shut up. Get out. You're ruining everything," she screamed. But he just stood there, looking at her with an expression that might have been pity. My brain was slow, stupid. I couldn't make sense of what his infertility had to do with me. "What does any of this have to do with why you hate me now?" I asked Bella, my voice trembling. "Why you cut me out and set me up with this dress?" Drew turned to me, his face exhausted in a way that seemed deeper than just today. "Bella convinced herself," he said, "that you got pregnant by me in college, that you had an abortion and never told anyone, that you were hiding this huge secret from her." The words hit me so hard I actually stepped backward. "No," I shouted, loud enough that someone jumped. "We always used protection. Always. I never got pregnant. Never had a reason to think I was pregnant." Bella started crying then, angry, guttural sobs that shook her entire body. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "Liar!" she screamed. "You disappeared for 2 weeks during spring break senior year. You came back different, quiet, wouldn't talk about where you'd been. I knew something happened. You were hiding it from me." Spring break, senior year. It came back to me in pieces. I got the flu the day before break started. A bad one. It knocked me completely flat. I spent 2 weeks in my dorm room, barely able to get out of bed. My roommate brought me soup. The RA checked on me because I looked so terrible. I even went to student health services twice because I couldn't shake the fever. I blurted it all out, talking fast, desperate for them to understand. My roommate can verify it. My RA saw me. I have medical records from the health center. Then, a quiet voice cut through the chaos. She's right. Sarah, my former roommate, stepped forward from where she'd been standing near the wall. She was sick the entire break. I brought her soup and medicine every single day. She never left our room except to go to the bathroom. I was so worried, I almost called her parents. Sarah looked directly at Bella when she said it. Bella spun toward Sarah so fast her bathrobe flew out. Liar, you're covering for her. You two planned this together. Her voice went shrill, but the other bridesmaids were shifting, looking at each other, murmuring. Roxana was frowning. Another girl I didn't know well was staring at Bella like she'd never seen her before. Bella's mom came closer, putting a hand on Bella's arm. Maybe they should postpone the ceremony, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Talk about this privately. Figure things out. Drew said there was more. He looked at me when he said it, not Bella. He admitted Bella had been obsessed with this idea for months, that she was convinced he got me pregnant because she couldn't have his children, that she'd been spiraling with jealousy and anger, creating this whole story in her head to explain her pain. He said he tried to talk her out of it, tried to get her to see reason, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept building this fantasy, bigger and bigger, until it took over everything. My stomach turned over. I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with hunger or tiredness. My best friend, since we were 5 years old, had spent over a year hating me for something that never happened, something she made up in her head. The white dress setup, the deleted texts, the public humiliation, it was all meant to punish me for a pregnancy that never existed, to justify cutting me out of her life in front of witnesses who would take her side. Bella collapsed into a chair by the window. Her cousin rushed over to comfort her, but Bella shoved her away so hard the cousin stumbled. Bella looked up at me, her face red and wet and twisted with something that looked like real, raw pain. I needed someone to blame, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Every month when I got my period and I wasn't pregnant, I felt like I was failing. Watching other people have babies made me want to scream. Knowing Drew and I had been together before, it ate at me constantly. I couldn't stand the thought that you might have had something with him that I could never have. So, I convinced myself it was true, made myself believe it, so I had a reason for why my life felt so wrong. I couldn't stay in that room another second. I grabbed my purse off the chair and walked toward the door. No one tried to stop me this time. Bella's mom was still holding Bella, whose face was buried in her hands. Drew stood frozen near the window, looking lost. The other bridesmaids stared at their phones or the floor, anywhere but at me. I pulled the door open and stepped into the hallway. The cool air hit my face, and I realized how hot and stuffy that room had been. My hands were shaking as I walked down the corridor toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard the door open again. Footsteps, quick and light. Sarah appeared next to me as I reached the stairwell. She touched my arm gently and I stopped. Her face looked genuinely sorry, not the fake sympathy people put on. She said she had no idea what Bella was planning with the dress colors, that Bella had told all of them just this morning that everyone was wearing blue. She said if she'd known Bella was setting me up, she would have warned me. I nodded, unable to get words out. Sarah walked down the stairs with me, not saying anything else, just being there. We crossed through the lobby, where wedding guests were starting to arrive. A few people stared at my white dress, but I kept my eyes forward. The parking lot was half full already. I found my car in the third row and unlocked it with shaking fingers. Sarah stood nearby while I got in and shut the door. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make my brain work again. Everything that just happened felt impossible. My best friend since kindergarten had spent over a year hating me for something that never happened. She made up an entire story in her head about me getting pregnant and hiding it. Then she planned this whole setup to humiliate me in front of everyone. The cruelty of it made my chest hurt. My phone started buzzing in my purse. I pulled it out and saw Drew's name. I declined the call. It buzzed again immediately. Another call from Drew. I declined that one too. Then texts started coming through, one after another. All from Drew, saying he was sorry, asking me not to leave yet, saying we needed to talk, that he could explain everything if I just gave him a chance. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and closed my eyes. A knock on my window made me jump. Sarah was standing there looking worried. I rolled down the window. She leaned in slightly. "Are you okay to drive?" she asked. "You look really shaken up. Maybe you should wait a bit." She offered to get me coffee and sit with me until I calmed down. Her kindness hit me like a wave, and suddenly I was crying. Real crying. Not just tears, but actual sobs I couldn't control. Sarah opened the car door and crouched down next to me. She didn't say anything, just put her hand on my shoulder and let me cry. After a few minutes, I managed to stop enough to breathe normally. Sarah suggested we go to the coffee shop down the street. She said she'd drive and we could come back for my car later. I agreed. I didn't trust myself behind the wheel. We walked to her car, and she drove us 3 blocks to a small coffee place. Inside it was quiet and cool. We sat at a corner table, and Sarah ordered us both iced coffees. When she came back with the drinks, she sat down across from me. "I need to tell you something," she said. She explained she only agreed to be a bridesmaid because she felt bad for Bella. A few months ago, Bella had told her about the infertility struggles, and Sarah felt terrible for her. But she had no idea about any grudge against me or this crazy theory about a pregnancy. She said Bella never even mentioned me during the wedding planning. Sarah pulled out her phone and opened her messages. She turned it toward me so I could see. There was a text thread with someone named Roxana. Sarah scrolled up to show me messages from earlier today. Roxana was saying Bella's behavior seemed really off and that something felt wrong about the whole situation. Sarah had responded, saying she agreed and thought Bella was acting unhinged. They both suspected something was weird, but didn't know what until everything exploded in that bridal suite. "Why didn't you warn me about the dress color?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Bella told all the bridesmaids this morning that you had insisted on wearing white, despite being asked to wear blue, that you were being difficult and trying to upstage the bride. Everyone believed it, because why would Bella lie about something like that?" She paused. They all thought I was the problem. My phone started ringing again. Drew, for what felt like the 100th time. Sarah looked at the screen, then at me. "Maybe you should answer it," she suggested. Drew seemed like he genuinely wants to explain everything and try to fix this disaster. I stared at the phone for another ring. Then I answered and put it on speaker so Sarah could hear too. Drew's voice came through immediately, fast and apologetic. He said he was so sorry for everything. He'd only learned about Bella's pregnancy theory 2 months ago, when she finally told him what she believed. He'd been trying to convince her to get therapy and tell me the truth, but she refused. Instead, she started planning this wedding humiliation. He said he should have warned me, but Bella threatened to call off the wedding if he contacted me. He thought he could fix it before today. He was wrong. Drew's voice cracked. He said the wedding was officially postponed, most guests already having left after Bella's mom told everyone there was a family emergency. He wanted to meet with me tomorrow to tell me everything that had been happening, to explain why he didn't warn me sooner. I told him I'd meet him for lunch tomorrow at the diner on Main Street back home. Then I hung up before he could say anything else. Sarah drove me back to the venue parking lot. I thanked her for everything, and she gave me her number, telling me to text her later if I needed anything. Then I got in my car and started the drive to my parents' house instead of the hotel where I'd planned to stay. The drive took 40 minutes, and I spent most of it replaying everything in my head. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my mom was outside watering her flowers. She looked up as I got out of the car. Her eyes went from my tear-streaked face to the white dress and back again. She dropped the hose and walked over to me. She didn't ask any questions, just wrapped me in a hug and led me inside. My dad was in the kitchen and stood up when he saw us. Mom sat me down at the table and started making tea. Then I told him everything. My dad stood up from the table and walked to the wall phone. He picked up the receiver and started dialing. I grabbed his arm, telling him to wait. He looked at me with angry eyes. "Bella's parents need to know what their daughter has done," he growled. I shook my head, explaining I wanted to talk to Drew first tomorrow before involving anyone else. My mom agreed. We should hear the full story before making calls. Dad hung up the phone, but kept his hand on it for a minute. He turned back to me. "I never trusted Bella's sudden coldness toward you over the past year," he admitted. I suspected something deeper was wrong, but couldn't figure out what. Mom nodded. "I noticed it, too. The way she avoided family gatherings and made excuses not to see you." I sat there, feeling stupid for not seeing it myself. Dad hugged me. "People going through pain sometimes lash out at the wrong targets," he said. "That doesn't make it okay, but it explains things." I went upstairs to my old bedroom and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Drew, but I didn't read them. Sleep felt impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bella's face in that bridal suite. The satisfied smirk when her cousin started yelling at me. I replayed the past year in my head, and suddenly everything looked different. The excluded engagement party wasn't about distance or convenience. Bella had deliberately cut me out. The last-minute bridesmaid invitation wasn't a kind gesture. It was bait for a trap. The white dress setup had been planned for weeks, maybe months. She deleted those text messages before I even arrived at the venue. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was calculated revenge for something that never happened. I thought about spring break senior year when I had the flu. I remembered being so sick I could barely stand up. Sarah brought me soup and crackers every day. My RA checked on me twice. I went to student health services, and they gave me medicine. There were records of all of it. But Bella had looked at some photo of me from that time and convinced herself I'd had an abortion. She built an entire fantasy in her head and used it to justify destroying our friendship. I felt sick thinking about how long she must have been planning this. How many nights had she spent imagining my face when I walked into that room in white? How many conversations had she had with her cousin, feeding the hate? I grabbed my phone and opened social media. I found the photo Bella must have seen. It was from spring break, posted by another girl from our dorm. I was in the background, wearing pajamas, looking tired because I had the flu. That was it. That was the evidence Bella used to build her accusation. The next morning, I drove to the diner on Main Street. Drew's car was already in the parking lot. I walked inside and saw him sitting in a booth by the window. He looked terrible. His eyes were red, and he had dark circles under them like he hadn't slept in days. I slid into the seat across from him and didn't say anything. The waitress came over, and Drew ordered coffee. I asked for the same. We sat in silence until she brought our cups. Drew wrapped both hands around his mug and stared into it. Then he started talking. He said Bella's grief over their infertility had been getting worse for months. At first, she just seemed sad and frustrated. Then she started getting angry at pregnant women in public. She would come home from the grocery store crying because she saw someone with a baby. Drew tried to get her to see a therapist, but she refused. She said therapy was for weak people. About 3 months ago, she started talking about me. She told Drew she had a theory about why they couldn't get pregnant. She said she thought I had gotten pregnant by him in college and terminated it without telling anyone. Drew told her that was impossible. He reminded her he was infertile from birth, that no pregnancy could have happened. But Bella wouldn't listen. She pulled up that photo from spring break and showed it to him. She said she looked thin and tired because she just had an abortion. Drew tried to explain about the flu, but Bella had already decided. She spent hours online researching abortion procedures and recovery times. She convinced herself the timeline matched perfectly. No matter what Drew said, she couldn't shake the idea. Drew took a drink of coffee and kept talking. He said Bella found more photos from that semester and analyzed all of them. She claimed my face looked different after spring break. She said I was hiding something. Drew tried showing her my social media posts from that time where I complained about being sick with the flu. Bella said I was lying to cover up the abortion. She started going through old text messages between us, looking for proof. When she couldn't find any, she said I must have deleted everything. Drew's voice cracked. He said watching her spiral like this had been horrible. He loved her, but she was becoming someone he didn't recognize. The worst part was knowing the entire foundation of her anger was medically impossible. He was infertile. There was documentation. But facts didn't matter to Bella anymore. She needed someone to blame for her pain, and she'd chosen me. I asked Drew why he didn't tell me months ago when this started. He looked down at his coffee. Bella threatened to call off the wedding if I contacted you, he confessed. She told me if I warned you about her theory, she would know I was taking your side over hers. Drew admitted he made a terrible choice. He thought if he gave her time, she would eventually accept reality and move past the delusion. He hoped their love would be enough to pull her back from the edge. Instead, she got worse. She started planning the wedding humiliation. She told Drew about the dress set up 2 weeks before the wedding, and he finally realized how far gone she was. He tried to stop her, but she said it was too late to back out. She said she deserves to be exposed in front of everyone. Drew said he should have called me that day, but he was a coward. He kept hoping she would change her mind at the last minute. He was wrong. I stared at Drew. Why are you staying with someone who could be this cruel and irrational? Drew rubbed his face with both hands. He said he loved Bella, but recognized she needed serious help. He told her yesterday, after I left the venue, that he was done enabling her delusions. He gave her an ultimatum. They would postpone the wedding indefinitely until she got real treatment from a psychiatrist. Not just a therapist, but someone who could evaluate if she needed medication. Bella screamed at him, said there was nothing wrong with her, that I was the problem. If he couldn't see that, maybe they shouldn't get married at all. Drew told her that was fine with him. He packed a bag and went to stay with his best man. This morning, Bella's mom called him, crying. She said Bella had finally admitted she might need help. They were looking for psychiatrists who specialized in grief and infertility issues. Drew leaned forward. There's more you need to know. He looked at me. Bella's cousin had known about the pregnancy accusation theory for weeks. Not only did she know, she encouraged it. The cousin told Bella she always suspected I had feelings for Drew. She said my friendship with Bella was fake, and I was just waiting for a chance to steal him. The cousin apparently had her own reasons for wanting me out of Bella's life. Drew said the cousin had always been jealous of my close relationship with Bella. When Bella started pulling away from me, the cousin saw an opportunity to become Bella's new best friend. She fed Bella's paranoia and helped plan the dress setup. She was the one who suggested deleting the text messages. Drew said the cousin was toxic, and he told Bella she needed to cut contact with her, too. Bella refused at first, but her mom agreed with Drew. The cousin was being frozen out. I sat back in the booth, trying to process everything. Part of me felt angry at Bella for the calculated cruelty. Part of me felt sorry for her because she was clearly suffering. But mostly I just felt sad. Our friendship was destroyed. Even if Bella got help and realized her accusations were false, I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. The white dress setup wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. It was planned revenge. She wanted to hurt me in the most public way possible. that kind of deliberate cruelty didn't just go away with therapy. Drew asked if I would be willing to meet with Bella and a therapist to help her confront reality. He said having me there to confirm the truth about spring break might help her accept that her theory was wrong. I told Drew I needed time to think about it. Right now, I was too hurt and too angry to sit in a room with Bella. Maybe eventually I could do it, but not yet. Drew nodded. He understood. He thanked me for meeting with him and apologized again for not warning me sooner. I told him I appreciated his honesty now, even if it came too late. Then I left the diner and drove back to my apartment 6 hours away. Over the next week, my phone filled with messages. Some were from wedding guests who heard what really happened. They apologized for believing Bella's lies about me insisting on wearing white. A few people said they felt terrible for not speaking up when they saw me standing there alone in that bridal suite. Roxana called me directly one evening. She said she wanted to apologize for not questioning Bella's story. She admitted the whole thing seemed weird, but she didn't want to cause drama. Now she felt guilty for staying silent. I told Roxana I appreciated the call and didn't blame her. She had no way of knowing what Bella was planning. Roxana said several other bridesmaids felt the same way and wanted to reach out, but weren't sure if I'd want to hear from them. I told her it was okay if they wanted to contact me. I wasn't angry at them. They were victims of Bella's manipulation, too. Over the next few days, Sarah and I texted back and forth constantly. She sent me screenshots of what Bella's cousin was posting on social media. The cousin claimed I showed up in white, knowing full well I was supposed to wear blue. She said I caused a huge scene and tried to ruin everything because I was jealous. Sarah told me at least 10 people who weren't even at the wedding were now sharing the cousin's version of events. I felt sick reading the lies, but Sarah kept telling me not to engage. She said anyone who mattered knew the truth. My mom noticed I was spending a lot of time on my phone looking upset. She sat me down one evening and suggested I talk to someone professional about everything that happened. She said, betrayal like this doesn't just go away on its own. I told her I was fine, but she gave me that look moms give when they know you're lying. The next morning, I looked up therapists in my area and scheduled an appointment for the following week. The therapist's office was in a small building near my apartment. I sat in the waiting room, filling out paperwork about my mental health history. When she called me back, I felt nervous, but also relieved to finally talk to someone neutral. I explained the whole wedding disaster from start to finish. She listened without interrupting and took notes. At the end, she told me something that stuck with me. She said Bella's behavior wasn't about me at all. It was about Bella's own pain and her inability to cope with her infertility in a healthy way. She said, "You didn't cause this, and you couldn't have prevented it. Bella needed help that had nothing to do with your friendship." I left that first session feeling lighter somehow. 2 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang with a number I recognized, Bella's mom. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice came through shaky and tearful. She apologized over and over for not seeing how bad things had gotten with her daughter. She said Bella started therapy 3 days after the wedding fell apart. The therapist diagnosed her with severe anxiety and depression triggered by the infertility news. Bella's mom said her daughter was slowly starting to accept that her accusations about me weren't based in reality. She said it was a long road, but Bella was trying. I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. Then Bella's mom asked if I would be willing to read a letter Bella wrote as part of her therapy homework. She said there was no pressure to respond and I could throw it away if I wanted. I agreed to read it, even though part of me wanted to refuse. The letter arrived 4 days later in a thick envelope. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. 6 pages of Bella's handwriting filled the envelope. She started by saying she understood if I hated her and never wanted to speak to her again. Then she explained how the infertility diagnosis destroyed her sense of self. She said she spiraled into this obsessive jealousy where she convinced herself I had gotten pregnant by Drew years ago. She knew logically it made no sense, but the delusion felt real to her at the time. She described planning the white dress setup as revenge for something that never happened. She took full responsibility for the cruelty and said our friendship was over because of her actions alone. She didn't ask me to forgive her or reach out. She just wanted me to know she was getting help and understood the damage she caused. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me felt angry that a mental health crisis could lead to such calculated cruelty. Part of me felt sad for the friend I used to have who was clearly suffering. I sat down and wrote a short response. I told Bella I appreciated her honesty and hoped therapy helped her heal. I said I needed space and time before I could even think about any kind of relationship between us. I told her I was setting this boundary for my own well-being, and it felt like the right thing to do. I mailed the letter and felt a strange sense of closure. 3 days later, Drew texted me. He said he and Bella were taking a break while she focused on treatment. He was staying with Ale, his best man from the wedding that never happened. Drew thanked me for reading Bella's letter and said it meant a lot to her healing process. I didn't respond right away because I wasn't sure what to say to him either. The next 3 months passed in a blur of work and building a new routine. Sarah and I met up twice for dinner, and she became a real friend instead of just someone I knew from that terrible day. I joined a book club at the library near my apartment. I started running in the mornings, before work. I focused on my job and got praise from my boss for a big project I completed. One afternoon, a guy from my company named Samuel stopped by my desk. We'd worked on a few projects together, but never really talked outside of work stuff. He asked if I wanted to grab dinner sometime. I was surprised, but realized I felt ready to say yes. Samuel and I went to a small restaurant downtown for a first date. We talked about work, our families, and what we like to do for fun. On our 4th date, I told him about the wedding disaster. I explained the whole thing, from the white dress setup to Bella's mental health crisis. Samuel listened carefully and didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said anyone who could plan that kind of public shaming had serious problems. He said it wasn't my fault, and he was glad I got away from that situation. We kept seeing each other regularly after that. A few weeks later, Sarah texted saying she was coming to visit for the weekend. I was excited to show her around my city. We went to museums, tried new restaurants, and stayed up late talking. On her last night, she told me Bella's cousin got caught lying about several other things to mutual friends. Apparently, people started questioning her version of the wedding events, and she got defensive. Now, she wasn't part of Bella's inner circle anymore. Sarah said it felt like justice in a weird way. I agreed. The weeks passed slowly as I focused on rebuilding my routine. Samuel and I went out twice more, and I started to feel like maybe I could actually move forward from all this mess. He never pushed me to talk about Bella or the wedding unless I brought it up first. One night after dinner at his place, I told him about Roxana's message and how nervous I felt about going home for Thanksgiving. He listened carefully and then said something that surprised me. He told me it took real strength to be willing to hear people out, even after they'd hurt me. He said most people would just cut everyone off and never look back. I realized he was right and felt a little better about the whole thing. Thanksgiving week arrived faster than I expected. I drove the 6 hours home on Wednesday afternoon, and my stomach twisted the entire way. My parents were excited to see me, and my mom had already started cooking. That night at dinner, my dad asked if I'd heard anything from Bella or Drew. I told them about the letter Bella wrote and how Drew had reached out. My mom's face got soft, and she said she hoped Bella got the help she needed, but she also said she was proud of me for setting boundaries. My dad just nodded and squeezed my hand across the table. Thursday morning, I met Roxana and 2 other bridesmaids at a coffee shop downtown. My hands shook a little as I walked in and saw them sitting at a corner table. Roxana stood up and hugged me immediately, which caught me off guard. The other 2 women looked genuinely uncomfortable as I sat down. Roxana started talking first. She apologized for believing Bella's story about me insisting on wearing white. She said the whole thing seemed out of character for me, but she'd been so focused on supporting Bella that she didn't question it. The other bridesmaids nodded and added their own apologies. One of them admitted she'd suspected something was off when Bella deleted those text messages, but she was too scared to speak up. They talked for almost an hour, explaining how Bella had painted me as obsessed with Drew for months before the wedding. They said they felt terrible for not reaching out sooner. I listened to everything they said and felt my anger slowly drain away. These women weren't the enemy. They'd been manipulated just like I had. I told them I appreciated their honesty and that I didn't hold any grudges. We ended up talking about other things after that, and it felt surprisingly normal. Friday afternoon, my parents told me something that made my chest tighten. They said Bella's parents had invited them to dinner the week before and explained that Bella was doing much better in therapy. She'd apparently accepted the truth about her false accusations and was working through her mental health issues. My dad said Bella's parents weren't pushing for any kind of reconciliation between us. They just wanted my parents to know that Bella understood the damage she'd caused. My mom added that Bella's mom had cried during dinner and apologized for not seeing how sick her daughter had become. I didn't know what to say to any of that. Part of me felt relieved that Bella was getting help. Another part of me felt angry that everyone expected me to just be okay with what she'd done because she was struggling mentally. I told my parents I needed time and they understood. The rest of Thanksgiving weekend passed quietly. Samuel texted me every day to check in and ask how I was handling everything. I found myself looking forward to his messages more than I expected. On Sunday morning, before I drove back to the city, my mom pulled me aside in the kitchen. She asked if Samuel and I were getting serious. I told her I wasn't sure yet, but that I really liked him. She smiled and said she was glad I'd found someone who treated me well. I realized she was right. Samuel was different from anyone I'd dated before. He actually listened when I talked and never made me feel like I was being dramatic about the Bella situation. December flew by in a blur of work deadlines and holiday preparations. Samuel and I saw each other at least twice a week, and I started to feel like maybe this could turn into something real. One night over dinner, I asked if he wanted to come home with me for Christmas. He said yes immediately and looked genuinely excited about meeting my family. I warned him that my parents would probably ask him a million questions, but he just laughed and said he could handle it. The week before Christmas, Drew sent me a text that made my stomach drop. He said he and Bella had broken up permanently. She needed to focus on her mental health without the pressure of their relationship. He sounded sad, but also relieved in a way that made sense. I wrote back a short message, saying I hoped they both found peace. He thanked me and said he was staying with Ale for a while until he figured out his next steps. Christmas Eve arrived, and Samuel drove home with me. My parents loved him instantly. My dad spent an hour showing him old family photos while my mom finished cooking. That night, after everyone went to bed, my mom found me in the kitchen making tea. She sat down at the table and told me she was glad I'd found someone who treated me with genuine respect and kindness. She said she'd worried about me after the wedding disaster, but seeing me with Samuel made her feel better. I hugged her and realized how lucky I was to have parents who actually cared about my happiness. Samuel fit into my family so naturally that by the end of the weekend, it felt like he'd always been part of our holiday traditions. January brought cold weather and a fresh start. Sarah texted me one morning with exciting news. She'd gotten a job in my city and was moving into an apartment near mine. I was thrilled because she'd become a real friend over the past few months. We met for dinner the night she arrived and spent hours talking and laughing. She brought up the wedding disaster at one point and said something that stuck with me. She told me that something positive had come from that terrible day. We'd built a real friendship based on honesty instead of the fake relationship I'd had with Bella. I realized she was right. Our friendship felt solid in a way my relationship with Bella never had. One Saturday afternoon in late January, I ran into Bella's mom at a coffee shop in my hometown. I'd driven back for the weekend to help my parents with some house projects. She saw me first and walked over with a nervous smile. We talked for maybe 10 minutes, and it was surprisingly warm. She told me Bella was doing genuinely well in treatment and had started making amends with other people she'd hurt during her crisis. She said Bella was learning to take responsibility for her actions instead of blaming her mental health for everything. I told her I was glad Bella was getting better. We hugged before she left, and I felt a strange sense of closure. 6 months after the wedding disaster, I received a final message from Bella. She said she was moving to a different state for a fresh start and wanted to wish me well. She thanked me for setting boundaries and said my response to her letter had helped her accept responsibility for what she'd done. She didn't ask me to forgive her or stay in touch. She just wanted me to know she was grateful for how I'd handled everything. I read the message 3 times and then wrote back a short response wishing her luck. I meant it, too. I hoped she found whatever she needed to be healthy and happy, but I also knew our friendship was over for good, and I was okay with that. Samuel and I celebrated our 6-month anniversary at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date. Over dessert, he reached across the table and took my hand. He told me he was falling in love with me. My heart jumped, but in a good way. I looked at him and realized I felt the same way. This relationship was built on trust and honesty in a way my friendship with Bella never truly was. He knew everything about the wedding disaster, and he'd never once made me feel like I was being overdramatic or dwelling on the past. He just supported me and let me process everything at my own pace. I told him I was falling in love with him too, and his whole face lit up. A year after everything happened, I sat in my apartment one Sunday morning, drinking coffee and thinking about how much my life had changed. I was genuinely happy with the authentic relationships I'd built. Samuel and I were talking about moving in together. Sarah lived 10 minutes away, and we saw each other at least once a week. My parents were proud of how I'd handled everything. The betrayal had taught me to value people who communicate honestly and respect boundaries. I'd learned that real friends don't manipulate you or create elaborate schemes to hurt you. They show up, they tell the truth, and they support you even when things get messy. I was grateful for the growth that came from surviving Bella's cruelty. It had forced me to figure out what I actually wanted in my relationships and my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Phew, that was a wild ride, wasn't it? Have you ever had a friendship completely shatter over something so utterly unbelievable? Or faced a betrayal that left you questioning everything? I'd really love to hear your thoughts down in the comments.